Hi, and welcome to the third installment from my kidney donation while trans series. This is probably take like 27 billion because I refuse to edit these and composite them together, which means I have to do the whole fucking thing in one shot, which isn't always that easy, especially when I have a shit ton to talk about like I do today. It also probably doesn't help that I'm a little bit buzzed because I like to, even though I'm just talking to my cell phone, I still get like this stage fright kind of thing going on. So, drink wine to take the edge off. Today I'm going to be talking about the physical and psychological evaluation that I underwent on Tuesday, September 4th. They ended up doing everything except the CAT scan. I've got that this Friday, so I'll make a video about that as well. So on September 4th, my day started out by waking up at 5 a.m., taking a final pee into the orange jug. They sent me these two great big orange jugs, right? I did like a brief video about it if you like really want to see what they looked like. And I was thinking, wow, how am I ever going to fill all of this? I guess some people do. I probably don't drink anywhere near enough fluids. I filled like one of those jugs about 3/4 of the way full. And I was thinking to myself, maybe this means I need to drink more water. I don't know. But I was feeling critical. I was feeling critical of myself. And I only filled 3/4 of 1 out of 2 of these great big ass jugs. But I'm like chronically dehydrated. That's true. I'm terrible about drinking water. So anyway, I wake up at 5. Because I've got a cab that's going to be there at 5:30. Because I think I need to be there at 6:30 a.m. As it turns out, I didn't need to be there till 7:30. But whatever. That wasn't my reality at that moment. My husband and I only share like one car, and I was not going to wake him and the children up at this obscene hour so that they could drive all the way to the fucking hospital in Madison and then drive back in fucking rush hour traffic. I decided I would rather just like bite the bullet and get a cab, so that's what I did. And when I get there, most of the hospital doesn't open up until like 8 a.m. and I'm there at like 6:30. So I have to go to this sort of like adjunct receptionist station, registration center, whatnot. And clearly the lady who was my intake specialist hadn't been like familiarized with the live donor protocol because there were all these resources and tools to help like navigate me through this day of like ridiculous appointments. This is like, I think I ended up being there. I got there at 6:30, and I didn't leave, and we didn't even get to this CAT scan, but I still didn't leave until like 4:30. So 9:30 to 4:30, what is that? Or not 9:30 to 4:30, 6:30. 6:30 to 4:30. Yeah, like 10 hours, like a 10-hour day, and we still didn't do one of the things. But anyway, there's a lot of appointments in there. And so typically, you know, the hospital gives you this resource. They have this folder that's prepared with some pamphlets and shit that they send you with the piss kit. So I'm not sure why they stick it in the folder again, but for whatever reason they do. Along with the schedule of where you're supposed to be when. And a little bit of directions to and from, because this is a very expansive hospital. It's a research hospital. And it's pretty big. At least it seemed pretty fucking big to me. And, like, not even all of the elevators go to the same floors. One will be, like, from the 1st to the 2nd. Another one's from, like, 3rd to the 4th. And one's, like, a golden magical elevator will take you to the 1st to the 6th floor. Oh, but wait, the 5th and 6th floor are cut in half in 2 different places. So you have to, like, go down and then go across and then go back up then to get there. It's like a Willy Wonka maze. So you really need these resources. But clearly she wasn't aware of that because she did not give them to me. The only directions I had were the ones that I furiously scribbled down while she was blathering away. So you're going to go to this place from this time to this time, and then to this place. You're going to go here and take this elevator, not that elevator. I was like, whoa. I need to take some fucking notes here, or I'm going to get hopelessly, miserably lost. And it was a ton of information, so I just like jotted down the next couple of places that she was under the impression that I was supposed to go. The first place that they sent me off to was the lab, and they took like 22 vials of blood. And I don't know if it's because I have like small veins or if it's because my blood is extra sticky because I've got really high triglycerides, which I ended up finding out later. I'll get to that. I don't know what it was, but they had to stick me 4 fucking times to get all the blood they needed because my blood kept coagulating in the tube. So they get like, 4 or 5 tubes, and then the tube would be too gummed up for any more to come out. They'd be like, so sorry, we gotta stick you again. There were 3 people who stuck me because they had like this weird policy where each person could only stick you once. And then the last guy stuck me twice, but we'll get to that. So the first person who stuck me was this young woman who was training. And she was actually by far the most graceful of all. I ended up having 4 stick marks, right? And 3 of them had like great big gnarly bruises. And the one that she did had no bruise at all. And I didn't even feel that shit when it went in. And she gets the blood that she can get. And then the guy that's training her, and it's not like she's inexperienced, it was just her first time working at this hospital. So I guess each hospital has its own protocol. So she was being trained for this hospital's protocol, which is a very skilled phlebotomist, obviously, because it was painless and bruiseless, and she had great bedside manner. And the guy who was training her was definitely more heavy-handed, for sure. He was able to get probably like 4 or 5 vials, but that was it, and then my blood coagulated in the tube again. And so then they had to call another dude over because of this policy where each person can only stick an IV in someone once, and they have to call someone else over. Not sure what that's about. If anyone knows and wants to comment, that would certainly be interesting. And so then the next dude comes in, and he sticks me, and even though it's in my vein, I can feel it's in my vein, he can feel it's in my vein, nothing's coming out. So he's like, I'm only allowed to stick you once, and each department's only allowed to stick you 3 times. I have to send you to another department. I'm like, that's fucking stupid. You should just stick me again on the down low. And he did, which was great. I'm also pretty sure that he was also gay, which was fantastic. And because I got that vibe from him, I started talking to him a little bit about my insecurities. Now I was nervous about the appointment and some of the stuff that I'd run up against so far, like having to sign out the high-risk form and being labeled high-risk just because I'm in a homosexual relationship. And how they should just call it what it is, high stigma, because I'm not any more likely to have AIDS than anybody else, right? Just because I have sex with other men doesn't mean that I'm having sex unsafely or that the people I'm having sex with are more likely to be infected. That's just stigma. As I said in another video, the fastest growing population right now of HIV-infected individuals is middle-aged white women. But people don't want to talk about that because that's not really what the concern is. Honestly, it probably doesn't even have anything to do with AIDS. There's probably just some super conservative people who don't, socially conservative, who don't feel comfortable with the idea of having a homosexual or a transsexual person's blood or organs, which is fucking stupid, but that doesn't mean that those people don't exist, right? So I was talking to him about that, and it was nice to have that sort of sense of camaraderie, and I'm grateful that my day started out with him. So then I'm under the impression that the next place I'm supposed to go is up to the 4th floor to the organ transplant center. And I'm glad that I knew to go to the 4th floor because if I had to look it up myself, I would have been hopelessly confused. I guess they have 2 organ transplant centers. One is an inpatient, one is an outpatient, and one's on the 4th floor on one wing and one's on the 6th floor on the other. But anyway, I went to the right one, so that was good. And when I get there, they're like, okay, so you've had your blood drawn, and you've had breakfast, and you've had a chest x-ray. I'm like, what? No. I didn't know I was supposed to have breakfast or a chest x-ray. As far as, I didn't know if I was going to be able to eat all day, right? Because I'd been fasting since 8 p.m. the night before for the blood draw. And then I knew I had to fast 4 hours before the CT scan, which didn't end up happening, at the end of the day. So I figured there might be a window there where I could eat, but I wasn't sure. No one told me I didn't have any information. And they're like, no, okay, well, you need to go eat something quickly because, 4-hour minimum before the CT scan. But if you can fast for longer, that's definitely ideal, and it means we might be able to get you out of here sooner. Ha ha ha. False. I was there longer than they would have predicted if I'd taken the CT scan. But anyway, so she's like, you should have this folder, you should have this schedule, I don't know why you have those things, but you should go get those things, and she sends me downstairs. So I go downstairs to the main registration center, which is now open at this point, and the guy who gives me my materials is really warm and nice. His name was Mike. I never remember people's names. It's significant that I remember his. I probably don't remember anyone else's name I interacted with that day, but I remember Mike's. And he got me some breakfast, which was cool, and he got me my folder and my schedule, and he explained things to me, and he was, like, super apologetic and friendly and kind. Not that I was, like, terribly bent out of shape about it, but still, you know, it's nice when people take the extra mile to be, like, kind and warm and gracious with you. So I get my little schedule. I find out the first thing I should have done is an x-ray, but whatevs. So I go, I get my x-ray. I had to put these things on my nipples. They were weird. These little stickers with little metal points on them. Little, like, metal balls or whatever. So I got to see what my nipples would look like if they were pierced. And that, they put that on you to, show on the x-ray where your nipples are, because I guess that tissue can be, otherwise kind of confusing when it shows up on the x-ray. I don't know. I'm not a master of this x-ray business, but for whatever reason they have to mark your nipples off on it. I didn't like peeling the stickers back off again. That was like an unfortunate feeling. And it was sort of awkward because I guess they have like 2 different aprons, right, for depending on what sex organs you have. And I have it listed as it's listed as female still on my insurance and on my medical records, because in Wisconsin what like services you can have is very dependent on that marker. And because I still have like some internal organs, I worry about not being able to have those organs checked into or looked at, or if, God forbid, I should get like a tumor or a cyst or something horrifying like that, I fear losing access to those services. And Wisconsin's not very progressive, and they don't have a very good like self-identification system, and there's not a lot of flexibility. So, depending on what it is, like my state ID says male on it, but my birth certificate is still female, because if I change it, if I got, like, let's say I got like a fucking tumor in my uterus or something, they might, insurance might not pay to remove it. They might be able to, within Wisconsin laws, say, oh, well, I'm so sorry, because you have an M here. It doesn't matter what organs you have in your body or what diseases they're riddled with. We're not going to help you with that. So that causes me extra complications, but it is what it is. It's frustrating, and that's part of the reason why these videos are important and why trans content is important. Because there's a lot of things that aren't accessible or inclusive, and there's a lot of rights and privileges that people take for granted that lots of other folks don't have. So I have to have like different identities all over the place so that I can have access to the services that I need, which is its own clusterfuck. But based on how I look versus the F that she saw there, she was like super confused, didn't know what to do. She was nice about it, but it was still kind of like an awkward exchange. She was struggling to even find words for it. She ended up just sort of gesturing me the apron, and she's like, where do you want, And she's like, you could have it here for this or here for that. And then she just sort of like walked away. She tried to be nice about it. I'm sure that was like as comfortable as she could be about it. It was okay, but it was a little weird. So I put the apron where I needed it. And she took the x-rays. And then I got sent back up to the 4th floor again, where there was yogurt and bananas and coffee waiting for me, which was super cool. And I talked to the surgeon first. I imagine he's the surgeon who would be removing my kidney, or maybe he's just a surgeon who consults with people who are considering organ donation. I'm not sure. But he was really, really nice, and he was really chill, and he asked me a bunch of questions. He asked me, how did I know my friend? Why was I considering doing this for my friends? Why was I willing to electively undergo a surgery, which has complications? And of course, anytime you even get put under anesthesia, regardless of whether anybody cuts you open or not, there's a very small chance that you could die. So I was explaining, how important my friend was, and what an impression they'd made on me, and how much I valued their life, and that it was really important to me that they had an improved quality of life, because right now their life is just so miserable. It's like a shell of what it should be. And then he also told me that I could schedule the surgery in between my 2 semesters, which was nice, because when I was initially undergoing the phone consultation with the organ coordination specialist, or live organ tissue. I forget exactly what her title is, but basically she fields incoming calls and asks potential donors a series of questions, and if they don't pass those questions, you just get eliminated right away, and the hospital doesn't waste its resources investing in you further as a potential donor. So she had made it seem like this was going to have to be some urgent matter, and like it couldn't, it might be a disqualifying factor for me if I would prefer to hold off on donating my organ for a couple of months so that I could do it in between school semesters. And the surgeon was like, what? No. If you want to do it on winter break, that's fine. You have control over when this happens. He was really reassuring and really empowering and validating, and I appreciated that a lot. And then after I saw him, let's see, I'm looking at my schedule from the day to help me remember. Who came next? There's the surgeon guy. Oh, yeah. Okay, so the next person was the nephrology person. And she basically went over the results of all of the blood tests. And it turns out that, like, every dude in my family on my dad's side, I have, like, wicked high cholesterol and triglycerides. And it's just, like, a genetic thing. It doesn't necessarily speak to, like, diet or behaviors. Of course, it's always best to try to have good diet, to try to have good exercise behaviors. And there's room for me to improve in that. There's probably room for most people to improve there. But for me, it's like a genetic thing. So it was really good to find that out, because I probably need to get on medicine for that, because my triglycerides are like insane. And that'll thicken your blood. So that could have been part of the reason why it took 4 IVs for me to be able to donate blood. Who knows? Maybe it would have congealed in the tubes anyway. I don't know. If you've ever donated a kidney before and you would be willing to share how many IVs it took you to donate 22 vials of blood, for a compare and contrast standpoint, I would be interested to know. So she goes through all my information, and she's like, yeah, your blood results look great. They look fantastic. You've got high cholesterol, high triglycerides. That's bad. You need to talk to your doctor about that, but that wouldn't impact your ability to give a kidney, and if you only had one kidney, it wouldn't make your cholesterol or triglyceride situation any worse. So I talked to her, and she was really fun and really nice, and she asked a lot of the same questions that the surgeon did, and we just, talked about a plan going forward, about how I need to contact my primary care physician about these results and figure out a plan for managing it, which I still haven't done yet, but I will. So I talked to the nephrology person, and then after that, I believe Kathy came in. And this is the organ coordinator person, the one who I had to give a 20-minute education on how we speak to trans people respectfully, because despite her best efforts, she just, was really struggling with that. And she asked me a lot of the same questions and told me what the day was going to be like. She was pleasant enough. She's a little off. There's something a little weird about her that I can't quite put my finger on. Maybe she's transphobic or homophobic. I don't know. She just seems like, I don't know, just fidgety. It's like fidgety and I don't know. It's really, really hard to articulate exactly what it is, but she just didn't seem relaxed. At no point did she seem relaxed around me. Maybe she was embarrassed because of the transphobic things she said before. I don't know, but she makes me uncomfortable. And I don't like having to sit in a room with her alone in chairs that close together. So we talked, and then, she's nice, she's helpful, but there's just this weird emotional dynamic component that made me feel not so at ease. And then after Kathy left, that was when Denise came in. And Denise was like the psychological expert. She was fucking awful. I felt so low and bad about myself after the psychological evaluation. I could definitely tell that the fact that I was married to another man weirded her out, and that the fact that I was a transsexual definitely weirded her out. There was disgust all over her face, these micro-expressions that people have, and for some of them, we could even call it a micro-expression, right? It was just she had resting bitch face through and through, and sometimes it was more pronounced than others, and the questions she asked me were they were very pointed. And I felt the whole time like I had to like defend myself. And like I've suffered from like sexual abuse in my life, and so that's on my medical chart because that got written in there when I was much younger. My suicide attempt is in there. There have been some dark points in my life for sure. That is not unusual at all for sexual abuse victims or for people who are transgender. Those two things together give you a really high rate of something like that, you know? And that was in my early 20s. I'm in my 30s now. That was like a fucking decade ago. She was so judgmental the way she said things. Oh, God, she was just awful. She was like, so I see that you're a sex abuse victim here. I know that a lot of sex abuse victims have problems with like doctors and surgeries. So how do you think you'll manage that? You know, and she wouldn't like give me a chance to answer these questions. I don't know if she thought they were rhetorical or what, but she would just like keep blathering. So she would say something like that and then just keep talking. And she's like, how do you think you would handle something like that? I'm concerned you wouldn't be able to handle things like that. People sometimes freak out in situations like that, and you have a lot of other factors about you that just make me feel concerned. And so I'm like trying to get a word in edgewise with her, and then when I do try to explain, you know, answer a question back, you know, talk about how, you know, the steps I've taken and the therapy I've had and the personal work that I've done to overcome my sex abuse trauma or whatever, and that doctors, or like at least being like examined, like it doesn't freak me out, you know. It was just like unbelievable. She was just awful. She was absolutely awful. And when I tried to talk to her, you know, I tried to say like my only real concern involving doctors is, you know, I've never had a single doctor, with the exception of my midwife during my second pregnancy, that I didn't have to like educate about trans issues and about trans health and how you talk to people who are transgender. I told her I was anticipating some stress with that because that was just, you know, a reality of my existence, but that I didn't really have any trauma about being touched or handled by the doctors, that I was fine, that I had done a lot of personal work and I hadn't had anxieties about those sorts of things in like years and years now. And she'd just be like, yeah, okay. I mean, a lot of people aren't able to feel better after something like that, but it's good that you think that you're able to. You know, just like condescending shit like that. And how disrespectful, right? Because like, how many people have been victims of sexual abuse? Like, if you grew up assigned a female and people perceived you that way, I mean, more often than not, people have stories of things like that happening to them, and it doesn't like break you for the rest of your life or ruin you. I mean, even when it's really traumatic and awful, you know, and it's like someone in your family, or it lasted for years, or it was really brutal. I mean, some people carry it around with them forever, but I think a lot of folks are really resilient. And she just made me feel like so broken and like a waste of space or whatever, because I had like this trauma history and because I had this different lived experience than her. And I just felt so gross and disgusting when she left, and I almost felt like I shouldn't be there. It affected me. It rocked me for sure, especially since she was a psychologist and I was worried about what kind of weight her opinion carried, and to just have somebody look at me like that, you know, to just look at me with disgust for an hour straight while I had to talk about some of the most like vulnerable things about me and about my life was a really like degrading, and in some ways it felt like a really violating experience. And I would definitely say that was by far the worst part of the day. Then thank God it ended. And the next person who came in was the nutritionalist. And that was only like 15 minutes. It was a really brief conversation. Nothing really notable or worth mentioning. Because having only one kidney doesn't really affect your diet or what you can eat all that much. I asked her for some suggestions about, you know, what diet recommendations she might make, just because my, you know, the cholesterol and the triglycerides were high. And a lot of her suggestions are things that I already do anyway. So, you know, I'll try to clean up my diet even more and exercise even more. But like I said, everyone who has a testosterone-dominated body has high cholesterol and high triglycerides, and my dad is like got hardly any body fat, is like a bodybuilder, and still has insane cholesterol and triglycerides just because of the genetics on that side of the family. He has to take medicine every day, and that will probably be my fate too. So that wasn't a super long meeting. After that was the caseworker. Everyone who donates an organ gets like a caseworker, and they're basically like your advocate. So they're there for you to talk to and connect with if you need financial assistance. And I'll probably need financial assistance. As a student, I'm not a terribly wealthy person. And we're going to have to cover, my husband's going to stay with me for probably a week or two after I have the kidney removed to help me recover and help me with the kids. His work's not going to give him paid time off for that. We won't be able to survive without those lost wages. So, we'll have to fundraise to recuperate those costs, which I'm willing to do. I'm willing to work as hard as I have to help my friend. So that's the caseworker's role, and she was really, really nice. And as soon as she got in there, we were asking questions, and she was asking me questions or whatever, and I just got like a really warm vibe off of her. She just seemed really kind. So I opened up to her a little bit about the psychologist, and I was like, can you tell me about the psychologist's like LGBTQ like training? How familiar is she with the LGBTQ community? And I just asked a lot of questions like that. And then she was like, do you have a bad experience with her or this or that? And I was like, well, she made me feel really gross for being in a homosexual relationship. She made me feel really gross for being trans. And she made me feel really gross for being a sex abuse victim and for having a suicide attempt. And I just let her know. I had shared with her some of the things that this woman had said to me, and just the feeling that it left me with afterwards, and that it made my anxiety go through the roof and made me feel like I should just leave the hospital with my waste of space self. Obviously, I recovered from that, but it was a pretty grueling hour, and she was really empathetic and kind, and reassured me that actually the psychologist's opinion doesn't carry a whole lot of weight compared to the doctor's. If there's any major red flags, that suggest that this probably isn't the best thing for the potential donor, then the psychologist would communicate that to the medical team, who would still ultimately make the final decision, which may or may not be in alignment with the psychologist's recommendations. So that made me feel better, and it felt good that she listened, because there's been a lot of times when I've received really unbelievably horrific care from doctors, and occasionally, a lot of times I just go home and move on with my life, right, because it's emotionally exhausting and draining. And those few handful of times when you do decide you're going to call back or call management, or decide that you're going to share your experience with someone, at least half the time or more, they get defensive with you, and they're like, what? That happened here? No way. We're awesome here. We love everyone here, And then you don't even really know what to say, because you've decided to be vulnerable and reach out to someone about an experience that you had that was wrong or violating on some level, and you're just met with a bunch of like defensive bullshit and people treating you like you're out of line for calling and even suggesting that you might have had an experience like that. So you just get used to expecting that it's going to be uncomfortable, that it might even be abusive, and that if you get in and get out with the services that you need, then you're lucky. You just get used to it. So she was really gracious, and she was really kind and receptive and validating, and I shared that sentiment with her too, that I really appreciated that opening up to people about how a trans or a homosexual identity impacts the way you get treated by the medical community. She didn't treat me like I was a liar or like I was exaggerating. I really appreciated that. And we didn't get through all of the questions. She had a ton of questions that I had kind of in-depth answers to. She was supposed to have called back at some point. She still hasn't. I don't know what's up with that. I should probably follow up. I have to do the CT scan first anyway this Friday, so one step at a time. But anyway, the caseworker was the next person, and that went pretty much to nearly the end of the day. And then after that, I got the electrocardiogram. So they basically just like listened to my heart monitored the electrical signals that it was sending and looked for any irregularities, and there weren't any. And that was the end of the day. Oh, and there was 2 dudes who gave me the electrocardiogram. One was a student, and one was the supervisor. And they were really, really nice. They were super nice, which I appreciated, because when I went to go check in, because like every section of the hospital has its own like registration desk as well. Well, not registration, because that's where you have to go and share your insurance information or whatever, but a check-in desk. And I know it, I try to be patient with intake folks, because I know that it's got that F on there, and I know that that confuses people. And I could tell that it confused this guy. I gave him my birth date and my last name, and he was like, "You're Casey Sullivan?" And spells my name. I'm like, yep, I am. And he was like, "And your birth date is this again?" And I was like, "Yep, that's my birth date." And he was like, "Okay." And he was like taking that moment, where he was like, "I don't get this." But he just went along with it, and, I appreciate that it was only that sort of strange look on his face and no commentary, because sometimes people want to, like, challenge me about it, or be like, "Are you sure?" or "I don't believe you," and then they don't say "I don't believe you," but, more or less, they're confused and they don't get it, or they're like, "Are you sure it's not a different birthday? Because I'm only pulling up this one person in the system, and I don't think it's probably you." And then I have to have this awkward conversation in the waiting room where everyone can hear me about how that is me, but that I'm a transsexual person. And then, people kind of look at you in the waiting room because they've heard you say that out loud. So luckily that didn't happen this time. He just sort of had that confused look and pause and sort of trepidation. But he's like, "Okay, I don't quite get it, not really putting those pieces together, but I'm polite, so I'm not going to push it, I'm just going to let it go." And I appreciated that. And I got taken back really quickly to have the electrocardiogram done, and that was a really pleasant experience, and those guys were super nice. The guy who was training was like so apologetic because he had to keep like repositioning my stickers, and I was like, "Don't worry about it, you're fine, it's not a big deal." And then he had to keep running the test. He wanted to like get like a perfect test, and my legs were like kind of spasming because I hadn't really eaten a whole lot all day. So he ended up running it like 5 or 6 times